Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com. DwyerVIP.com for premium picks. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. You know, from time to time, public opinion gets out of hand. We overdo the good, right? A team does a few things well, and suddenly everyone around you wants you to believe that this team is the best ever, that this team has a red carpet to the championship. So it is with the Miami Heat. I've been watching this Heat streak. I'll tell you what, it's riveting. The Heat certainly have put it together. They are the defending champs. They do have the best player in the game today. The question is, how good is this team? Is this team the best ever? How do they stack up against the best teams in history? Now, I'm not going to go back that far, but let me just tell you my bias. I've watched basketball for years, right? I've seen a lot of great teams. I remember being a little kid, and I remember watching Clyde, Earl the Pearl, Dave DeBusschere, Bill Bradley, Willis Reed, the New York Knicks from back in the early 70s, right? I've seen better than these Bulls. And I'm not one of these people who always believes that the older teams are better than the newer teams. But I'll tell you what, rather than talk about the 1970s, let's talk about just recent memory, right? Since the mid-1980s. We won't even go back to Andrew Toney, Julius Erving, Moses Malone, and the 4-5-4 year, right? We're not even going to go back to the 83 Sixers. Let's just talk about recent statistics that you yourself can look up on basketball-reference.com, right? Now, the Miami Heat, rather than go off absolute numbers, right? Let's just compare and contrast the Heat to the other teams this season, right? Now, there is a metric, offensive rating. It's how many points you score per 100 possessions, right? The Miami Heat this year, per 100 possessions, ranked number 1 of the 30 teams in the NBA in that category, right? Defensive rating, right? It's how few points you give up per 100 possessions. The Heat rank 10th. In other words, 9 teams give up fewer points than the Heat do per 100 possessions. Now understand, the air is high and it's thin when we start talking about the best teams ever, right? If you're going to compare this Heat team to the 1995, 1996, 72 and 10 Chicago Bulls, right? You just need to know that in terms of offensive ratings, points scored per 100 possessions, the Bulls, like the Heat, ranked number 1 that year. Number 1. And you just need to know that defensively, in terms of giving up points per 100 possessions, you need to know that while the Heat ranked 10th this season, 10th, Jordan's Bulls ranked number 1 in 95 to 96. In other words, in 95 to 96, Jordan's Bulls were the best in the league offensively, and they were the best in the league defensively, right? Let's go further. And there's some other teams I'm going to mention too. But let's talk about these two, because these two, for whatever reason, grab the attention, right? Michael, LeBron, players so good you can just refer to them by one name. Now understand, the Miami Heat only have two guys on their roster right now who are averaging more than 6 rebounds a game. Folks, they don't have a dominant rebounding center, right? So LeBron James averages 8.2 boards per game. Understand that Chris Bosh averages 6.8 boards per game. Jordan's Bulls, in addition to having Michael average 6.6 boards a game, and Scottie Pippen averaging 6.4 boards a game. Jordan 6.6, Scottie Pippen 6.4. Understand they had a guy on their team who led the league in rebounding, Dennis Rodman, who averaged 14.9 boards per game. Let me also tell you, let's just talk length for a moment, right? No doubt the Miami Heat are athletic, but understand this Bull team had the length advantage. You have Luke Longley, very tall Luke Longley. By the way, he had 5.1 boards per game. You had very tall Bill Wennington. Now this might surprise some people, but these guys actually played in a decent number of games. You also had very tall James Edwards, the same James Edwards who was on the bad boy Detroit Piston team from the late 80s. And you also had John Sally. In other words, the Bulls had multiple 7-footers. Multiple. At least 4 7-footers to go with Jordan and Pippen. Right? Understand, too, that there was a third guy on the Bull team who actually had pretty good numbers and who actually scored more than 10 points a game, and that was Tony Kukoc. Right? Now, Kukoc, and it's important to remember this, actually hit 40%, 40.3% of his threes. In fact, although the Miami Heat have 4 guys who make 1.4 or more threes per game, it's important to realize that Jordan, back in the mid-90s, hit 1.4 threes per game, Pippen 1.9 threes per game, Tony Kukoc 1.1, but he was a 40% shooter from three-point range, and Steve Kerr, they actually had a three-point specialist on the team who hit 1.5% of his threes from three-point range, and it might shock some people to learn that Steve Kerr on this 95-96 Bull team hit 51.5% of his threes. Right? So you're talking about an elite team defensively, with length, with range. Now the Heat certainly have range. LeBron hits 1.4% of his threes, 1.4 threes per game. Ray Allen 1.8, Mario Chalmers 1.5, Shane Battier 1.9. There's no question that the Heat have long-distance shooters. My point is simply that the Bulls did as well, right, with better team defense and with, quite frankly, a player who has numbers no one on the Heat can match. Michael Jordan, forget the 30.4 points a game. And by the way, that's almost 4 more than LeBron's 26.6. Forget the scoring. Understand that Michael Jordan averaged per game in 95-96 2.2 steals a game. Right? No one on the Heat comes within half a steal of that number. Understand, too, Scottie Pippen 1.7 steals per game, as many as LeBron right now. Right? So, I would argue that all things considered, in their time, the 95-96 Chicago Bulls, by virtue of being the best defensively, were a better team than this Miami Heat team that is the 10th best defensively this year. Let's talk about some other teams. Let's talk about the Detroit Pistons, 88 to 89. Now understand, they were 7th offensively, right? And measuring it by scoring per 100 possessions. They were 7th offensively their year. They were 3rd defensively their year. But what's striking with the Pistons, and it really is noteworthy, is the fact that this team was so deep that they had 6 guys who averaged more than 13 points a game on the roster. 6. Also, in terms of length and defense, think about it, right? This is a great defensive team. Just the good defensive tall guys. Bill Laimbeer, James Edwards, Rick Mahorn, John Sally. They also had great defender Dennis Rodman to go with, of course, Joe Dumars. Right? This is a team that, quite frankly, has much more length and much more depth than this Miami Heat team. Much more. It's not close, right? Let's talk about another team. And this team might surprise some people. The 1999 to 2000 Los Angeles Lakers, right? The coach, Phil Jackson. Their major player, Shaquille O'Neal. They also had other players, Kobe Bryant, Rick Fox, Derek Fisher. Now this team, with Shaq, averaging 29.7 points a game, had the 5th best offensive team that year. The 5th. Understand, defensively, they were the best team in the NBA that year. They were number 1 defensively, right? Again, those numbers, if you put a composite of those numbers together, 5 and 1, it beats the Miami Heat's number 1 rating offensively, number 10 rating defensively, right? Here's the question for all the Miami Heat fans. Who on the Heat would stop Shaquille O'Neal? Let me read the numbers. 13.6 rebounds a game. 3 blocks a game. How good was Shaq? Shaq, a center, averaged 3.8 assists a game. And all of that went with 29.7 points a game. How good was this team defensively? Kobe Bryant, 1.6 steals per game. Ron Harper, 1.1 steals a game. Derek Fisher, 1 steal a game. Robert Horry, 1.1 steals a game. Now I know many basketball people are going to say that this Laker team didn't shoot the 3, as well as the Miami Heat is shooting the 3 right now. But understand, percentage-wise, game was a little bit different then, but percentage-wise, the Lakers had very good long-range shooters, right? If they're hitting at a decent percentage, I don't see why they wouldn't continue to do so with greater volume. They weren't slouches from the outside. Case in point, Glenn Rice hits 36.7% of his threes, right? Derek Fisher, 31.3% of his threes. Rick Fox, 32.6% of his threes, right? And of course, when it comes to shot blocking, the Heat aren't a shot blocking team. Chris Bosh leads the Heat with 1.3 block shots per game. Understand, the Lakers, in addition to having Shaq average 3 blocks a game, got 1.1 blocks per game from Robert Horry and got .9 blocks per game from Kobe Bryant. Let me ask you too, in terms of closers, guys who produce in the last 30 seconds of a game, which team has the better closers? LeBron and Dwayne Wade, or Kobe and Robert Horry? Right? So I believe if you're going to look at team dominance in a particular year, I think the Lakers arguably dominated 1999 to 2000 more than the Miami Heat have dominated this past year. And if you're going to talk about the greatest teams ever, given that this league has had great centers, you need to ask yourself how the Heat would cope with a great center like Shaquille O'Neal. There is no center in the game today as dominant as Shaquille O'Neal was 1999 to 2000. Keep in mind, this Laker team, by the way, proved their dominance by winning 3 consecutive titles. Right? So, as we talk about the Heat, the question to me isn't whether the Heat are the best ever. The question to me is whether the Heat are the best in the last 30 years. I think that's an open question. I don't know how a team could have 9 teams ahead of it, 9, defensively, and compete historically with a team like the Bulls, who were number 1 offensively and number 1 defensively. I have a lot of respect for the Heat, clearly, but let's just say I have my doubts. Also, with regard to length, the Heat are one of these new style teams with a lot of 6'9" guys. That's great. Unfortunately, some of these teams, including Jordan's mid-90s Bulls, had several tall guys. In the playoffs, when the game becomes more of a half-court game and height matters, don't you think that some of these Heat players are going to find it a little bit more difficult to get their shots off inside against these tall players? Especially when the teams they're playing have higher defensive rankings than they do. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. Let me also point out, too, I know the Laker team that won 33 games in a row won the title. Understand that the Houston Rocket team that won, I believe it was 22 games in a row, did not. These streaks don't necessarily equate to titles, right? Let me also point out that if you believe the Heat are the best team ever or close to it, then it would be inconsistent for you to believe that if the Heat get into the finals, they're going to have a problem against San Antonio or Oklahoma City, right? If you believe the Heat are going to have a problem in the finals, then you need to realize that Michael Jordan, with all the rings that he got, never had to play a Game 7 in an NBA final. He certainly didn't have to in 95-96, right? And let me just say, you need to realize that the Lakers in 1999 and 2000 didn't have to play a Game 7 either, right? So either the Heat are one of the best teams ever, or they're a team that is ranked 10th defensively this year, looking at possible problems deep in the playoffs. It can't be both. Let me hear from you. Thanks for stopping by.